is C.K. Hoffler, and I am chairman of the board, or chairwoman of the board, of the nationally, internationally recognized, renowned organization, Rainbow Push Coalition. It is indeed an honor for me to be here today as the attorney I've been Reverend Jackson's attorney for 32 years and have had the pleasure of working with these organizations. And it is such a great honor to welcome this magnificent panel. And Reverend Jackson, I'm going to introduce you, even though you need no introduction, because there's not a way, there's not a day, there's not a moment that passes that we cannot not recognize that each of us, even as officers of the court, African-American, Latino, Latina, Asian American, and people in this world stand on your shoulders because of the fight that you have had to launch for all of us for decades. So we salute you. But I wanted to welcome everybody to this wonderful panel. These panelists are first in their respective communities. And today, because of what's happening around us, because of the climate in this country, we felt it only fitting to talk about policing, to talk about law enforcement, to talk about police unions, and to talk about the impact that each one of our magnificent panels has had in their community and the challenges. So against that backdrop, I want to just say a word for us to really recognize one of our fallen sheroes, Supreme Court Justice Ruth Ginsburg, who passed recently. She was a purveyor of justice, a fighter, one of my sheroes. She fought for equality. She was a big fan of Reverend Jesse Jackson, Rainbow Push, and all of her efforts. So we salute her, and we know that she's resting in peace. And she fought and held on until she could fight no more. So we must pick up the mantle. So against that backdrop, Reverend Jackson, I'd like to just say a few words about you. You've been fighting for 6 decades in this space for racial equality, racial justice, social justice, so that African Americans, Latinos, and people of color could walk through corporate doors and could break through glass ceilings. For women, for men, for children, for the least of these, we thank you for all of your fights, and that you were able to assemble and a panel that has this kind of a panel that has the first of so many is because of you as a human being, as a civil rights activist, as a human rights activist, as a trailblazer, who I met in 1988. The first time I met you, Reverend Jackson, actually I met you before, but the first time I worked with you was in 1988 in connection with a trip to Libreville, Gabon, when we were going to see the president of Gabon, Haj Omar Bongo. And ever since that time, we all had a strong appreciation when we were saying, run, Jesse, run, Jesse, run, in 1984 and 1988, that but for your efforts, there would not have been a President Barack Obama, but for your efforts, there would not have been a Kamala Harris on the ticket. So we thank you and we salute you. Reverend Jackson.
CK, good morning, and thank you very much for those words of encouragement. Let me say to all of you today, I think we should at first pause. I want Reverend Todd Year, who is our senior VP in Baltimore and the bureau chief in Washington, lead us in prayer for Ruth Ginsburg. Her role was she's the Supreme Court, she's Supreme of the Supreme Court. Her work for gender equality has big meaning for women, therefore for families everywhere. On matters of racial justice and gender equality, we could always count on her. And then she had worked to the end, and now her fight continues. Reverend Yeri.
Let us pause for a moment in silent reflection on the life, the work, and now the legacy of the late Associate Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Gracious and magnificent God, we thank you for the gift of life and service. We are mindful that even as a nation, we've made certain declarations, but they are nothing without you. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all persons are created equal and are endowed by you with certain unalienable rights, among them life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. We thank you for the champion of unalienable rights, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who now rests with you in eternity after having spent a season here making our lives better. We recognize that on this call, as we have this discussion today, the work of these who serve in the capacities of state's attorneys and lawyers have now an even bigger burden because there are now shoes left to fill. But we believe, oh God, that as long as we're connected to you, the work indeed can be achieved and accomplished. Strengthen our hands, encourage our hearts, and give us minds focused on doing this, thy work, and doing thy will. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you, Todd. In part, Maryland and makeup, we have our sister Valdez on the phone from New Jersey. Here's the Hispanic dimension of our work. The 100 largest is majority Black and brown. We must learn to live together. Baltimore, Washington, Miami, New York, LA, Chicago. 100 largest is majority Black and brown. We must work on trying to teach young Blacks to speak Spanish, young Latinos to speak English. We must be neighbors and friends and build coalitions. So, Sister Kamala, thank you very much. I also want to express my thanks to Shelley Davis, who was our executive director of this Zoom call. Shelley is our political director out of Washington. Shelley, thank you very much for all that you've done and been with us for 20 years, and he's been around the ballpark 2 or 3 times. Also, I spent a lot of time with Kim here in Chicago. She's constantly on the fire. All you guys are on the fire. We talk about why are you on the fire? Dr. King was killed in 68 and 69. Stacey Turner led a raid and killed Fred Hampton in his bed sleep. Stacey Turner did that. And they played the role of using these positions for prosecutors. Stepping into their next position. They use these positions to be cruel, and there'll be reputations on the backs of our children. And you don't do that. That's one reason why you're on the fire. We'll talk about that in this morning's conversation. I also want to indicate the concern we have, whether it is Kenosha or Milwaukee or Louisville or Baltimore. These cities, they saw us coming to take over. Police departments, fire departments, and city workers live outside the city. They take with them jobs and tax base. They shop in the suburbs. They live in the suburbs. They take the tax base out there with them, and we end up with what's left. They leave in town, use some Federation police officer, some union guy, argue their case, and they fight for the right to be unaccountable. They said to me, if you make them accountable, you come on the fire, and we stand with you in that struggle. I also want to make a couple other things before we go today. I finished a book with Sister Grace Kim some time ago called Keeping Hope Alive. I want you to get a copy of this book. It's a book of speeches and sermons. The A84 speech and the A88 speech and a lot of other speeches in there. Please get Amazon.com, get one. We'll talk more about that in the future. We're doing some more writing, even as we speak. I really want to thank you, CK, for being the interlocutor, as it were, in this conversation today. We're in a very difficult situation. I thought this morning, I don't like to speak of out of turn about superstition, but look at the fires in California, water in the South, pandemic 19 and pandemic 16 and 19. The president who's indifferent seems to all of it. That's like are we under some kind of curse? We're still under a lot of tension. And our concern is to relate to you in such a way that your community must appreciate what you do. Because once you get there, we elect you because you're popular. We don't really know what your job description is. We've never seen it before. So us working with you so that people will know what you really do. So our expectations are focused. And I appreciate your work. Fortunately, I'm able to travel enough before the pandemic, at least, to see what you do and what you try to do. And I know the heat that you're under. Repeat again, part of Maryland is because of this. Prior to your coming in, they run for state's attorney for the purpose of using the platform to make a case for higher office. We locked them up. We did that. And you guys are taking a different approach. So I want to express my thanks to you and thanks again to Tayyera, CBB, and Shannon Davis for making it happen. And CK, you have it. Thank you guys very much, okay?
Thank you, Reverend. Thank you, Reverend, for your words of inspiration. So there's a famous Portuguese expression that I think is appropriate to begin our discussion. It is, a luta continua, vitória é certa. It means the struggle continues, but victory is certain. So when I think about Kim Foxx, the state attorney for Cook County, who runs an office of over 800 attorneys, 1,500 employees, the first of the first of the first. When I think of the struggle and the fight that she's faced outside protesters coming to defeat her in Cook County, we are honored to support her and to let her know. And now I'm speaking as also president of the National Bar Association, because you're one of my members. We support you. In fact, all of you, including Ms. Valdez, we support you. And that's what today is about. They were facing 3 pandemics: COVID-19, election suppression, and police brutality. So I'd like to direct my first question to the Cook County State Attorney, Kim Foxx. And I'd like you to discuss, just with for our viewers, your journey and some of the issues that you've confronted with gun violence, given the very courageous positions that you take.
Well, first and foremost, thank you for having me on this panel. Thank you, Reverend Jackson, for just being a steadfast leader for the last 60 years, so my entire lifetime. And since I've been in office, I have not had a crisis in which the Reverend has not called me and held my hand through it and prayed with me. And so I'm honored. And for my fellow colleagues who are on the call, many of whom I consider to be family, my sisters, Kim and Marilyn, and for the others that I've not yet had an opportunity to meet personally, thank you for being on the panel with us. And to Erica, the head of the NBPA, who works in our office and has done amazing things. It's just an honor to be with you all. It has been a journey, to say the least, for those who did not know the history of the assassination of Fred Hampton, that it was in fact orchestrated through the Cook County State's Attorney's Office, and that legacy that has hung with this office for the past 50 years. I came into office in 2016, a year in which we were reckoning with the police killing of Laquan McDonald, a 17-year-old boy who was pumped with 16 bullets as he lay on the ground. That had come in the wake of the work that Maryland had done in Baltimore and the death of Freddie Gray, or what Kim had seen in Ms. Ferguson with the death of Mike Brown. All of those instances were happening as I was coming into office, as Maryland had just gotten there, as Kim had come into office. And so 2020 feels eerily reminiscent to me. Eerily reminiscent that we have seen this repetition of Black death at the hands of law enforcement and communities crying out for change. It's also eerily reminiscent in that 2016 was the bloodiest year we'd had in Chicago since 1999. And in fact, 2020, we are outpacing 2016. And people would say to you that when you're dealing with the issue of violence, the gun violence that we're seeing in Chicago, that you cannot concern yourself with criminal justice reform. You cannot concern yourself with the issues that got you here around police accountability, that there is a hijacking of the conversation around justice reform and what we're seeing in our streets. I've spent the last couple of weeks talking more about property damage, which is important, we ought to be talking about, and not enough talking about the structures that need to be in place to ensure that we don't revisit where we are in these times. And so when I came into office in 2016, much like as I run for re-election now, it has been on the premise of keeping our communities safe and having a criminal justice system that is fair and equitable. Because the truth is, people will not engage in our justice system if they don't believe that it has legitimacy. That in the neighborhoods that have the highest levels of violence, they are probably those who are least likely to call the police. They would much rather handle it themselves if they believe that they don't know if they're going to get a Jason Van Dyke, the type of police officer who killed Laquan McDonald, or Sergeant Watts, who was shaking down drug dealers in the Ida B. Wells public housing project, planting drugs, planting guns, that if their experience with law enforcement has been so fractured that when violence occurs in the community, they would rather deal with it themselves, we're going to be in this perpetual silence or cycle of violence. And so we can't separate dealing with public safety and the integrity of our justice system. They go hand in hand. And so when we're seeing what we're seeing in the streets right now, and we see violence up across the country, it's not just Chicago. I'm sure my colleagues can tell you where they live, they're also seeing it. And if we continue to have this half conversation around what do we do about violence and not do anything around criminal justice reform, we're going to keep revisiting this. And so we've done things like, go after wrongful convictions, rebuilding our conviction integrity unit, vacating over 100 convictions just in the last 3.5 years. We've done things like work for marijuana legalization. And I'm not condoning marijuana use, but what I know is that when John Boehner can now sit on the board of a marijuana company and now make millions of dollars while people who live in impacted neighborhoods have convictions on their records, I can't sit with that. And so we baked into our law the ability to have those convictions automatically expunged. We also stopped going after people for low-level nonviolent offenses. And that's because, to me, how do I justify to that mother who's trying to find what happened to the killer of her child that we spend more resources going after low-level retail theft than we do after guns? And so we created the first of its kind gun crime strategies unit, placing our assistance in neighborhoods impacted by violence. I'm so proud to be on this panel with Erica, like I said, from our office, who is a pioneer in that work, where we've seen a dramatic reduction where we place our assistance. And so that comes with a little strife, a little pushback. The police unions have made no bones about their disdain for me. You talk about the march on my office on April 1st, 2019, over 150 members of the Fraternal Order of Police and their supporters, including 4 white nationalist groups, including members of QAnon, showed up at my office attempting to run me out of town. And they made no bones about why they were there. They claimed it was about one celebrity case, but they told the truth, that it was about my reforms on bail reform. It was about my efforts on marijuana. It was about my efforts on low-level convictions, that I wasn't acting in the way that they wanted their state's attorney to act. And I'll end with this. I didn't get into this role to rubber stamp practices and policies of the Fraternal Order of Police. I got into this role to keep our community safe. I remind people in every panel that I do, I come from one of the toughest public housing projects in the city of Chicago, and in fact, once in the nation, of Cabrini Green. The fact that someone like me could survive through that, to be able to get into this role and sit in this seat and not recognize that we lose far too many young people who were far more talented than me, had far more potential than me, to violence or to our prison systems by an unjust, racist institution that has been allowed to churn in the way that it's churned because it's gone unchecked. I can't sit in this role, having gone what I've gone through, and be beholden to anyone other than the people who got me here, who in 2016 overwhelmingly said that this is the change that they wanted, and that's the change that we're going to continue to provide.
CK.
Yes, Reverend. I'm sorry, I was muted and talking.
On
Yes.
camera, I should be saying that Chicago does not have the gun shop or gun range. 7% of the guns come from Indiana, Kentucky, and Mississippi. That's federal territory. 75% of the guns come from a gun shop just across the border. So we're trapped with these guns and the like. The hostile FOP is a constant attacking Kim. Nick in front of we faced them down. Kim was upset. We faced them down that day. We want to mobilize people in your community not to be confused And when you're on attack to defend you, because you can't defend yourself. Kim, thank you, Kim. You represent us so well. Thank you, Kim.
Absolutely, absolutely. And you mentioned Erica Gilliam, who's in your office, who's the president of the National Black Prosecutors Association. And I wanted to turn to Erica because recently we saw a historic settlement in many respects recently over the past couple of days in Breonna Taylor's case in Kentucky, in Louisville, Kentucky. And of course, I have to proudly boast of one of my vice presidents of the National Bar was her lead counsel, and that was Lanita Baker. Ben Crump was brought in by Lanita Baker as a co-counsel, past president of the National Bar. And that was a historic settlement, not just the monetary value, but more what I call the programmatic, the changes, policing reform. So Erica Gilliam, who is the magnificent assistant state attorney that we heard Kim Foxx mention, could you comment on that? Comment on that historic settlement. And then I'm going to go to Ms. Valdez, because I would like you to comment on that too, being in New Jersey. Okay, Erica?
Thank you very much. So first, I want to thank Reverend Jesse Jackson. Thank you for having me here, and all the panelists. And I just want to make clear from the National Black Prosecutors Association, and specifically my boss, Kim Foxx, thank you, because it is very important that we have a champion of criminal justice reform. And switching to the hat of president of the National Black Prosecutors Association, Kim Garner, Marilyn Mosby, and also Kamala Valdez, who is a newly elected regional director. We support you. And I want to be very, very clear as to that, because our mission is to retain and recruit. And during this time right now, it is very, very important that we lend our support to you, because you are the elite 1% at this point. And it is very important that we support you. So I just want to make that clear. Now, as to the settlement, now, coming from a sense of Black prosecutors and supporting our communities, it's very, very important that we walk the walk and talk the talk. So if you have an instance where there is a settlement and something is wrong, that's very important, because it actually brings visibility, it brings transparency to what's going on. So that is, it's something that needs to be done. It's something that's very important, because it shows if wrong is wrong, that's where it has to be corrected.
Thank you so much for your comments. So let's turn to Kamala Valdez. You're the first Latina county prosecutor in the state of New Jersey, and as a Passaic, New Jersey. You have Dominican heritage. You're a member of Alpha Kappa Alpha and sorority. I say that because we have inked a deal, the National Bar, with the Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority, and you all have over 800 lawyers that are part of the National Bar's election protection effort. We had our first training last night. And of course, you have Kamala Harris, who's a member of your sorority as well. Could you comment on your thoughts of-
Kim
We got Omega Psi Phi in the house. We got it. Yes, absolutely. And the Omegas are working with us too.
And Delta Sigma Theta.
And Delta Theta and the Kappas too. I mean, we have the Divine Nine all joining the National Election Protection effort. I just don't want to leave anyone out. But I'm just
non-dues paying member Alpha.
All I was going to say is we all know what the first letter of the Greek alphabet is, and we'll just leave it there. You may proceed, Madam Chair.
Here we go. Here we go. But this is the beauty, really, of being where we are in the space that we're in. And so we applaud you for your efforts. You wear many hats. And this fight is about Black and brown people. So really, it is about what's happening in our communities. So would you give us, first of all, a flavor of what it has been like for you, the first of the first in your community, and fighting injustice, social injustice, and in trying to hold accountable those who decimate our community and law enforcement? And then also, if you could comment on the settlement.
Well, good morning, everyone. Reverend Jackson, C.K. Hoffler, Erica, thank you for the opportunity to sit and talk with you. Erica made space for me, and I appreciate that. My journey here was an improbable journey. I was sitting at the at the U.S. Attorney's Office, working for then U.S. Attorney Chris Christie, minding my own business, trying cases, and dealing with the fact that I'm a special needs mom. I have two beautiful autistic daughters, and I was navigating that whole spectrum. And so when the opportunity came to be approached for this opportunity, I really didn't think it would happen. In New Jersey, all county prosecutors and our attorney general are appointed, so we don't run. It was an unlikely proposition for then Governor Corzine, a Democrat, to appoint someone who was working for, who would be his opponent. But here we are. And by way of background, I came to the position because I was born in the Bronx and raised in Newark as a daughter of Dominican immigrants. And the Bronx, like Newark, wonderful, culturally rich societies, communities that have its share of issues: violence, addiction, poverty, gender bias, things that we seldom don't talk about. So my path here really has been to serve. And I am a member of Alpha Kappa Alpha and sit on so many different boards and organizations, because I find that as a law enforcement official, we need to work in collaboration with other groups to be able to, first of all, deal with the loneliness and the isolation of being a person of color, dealing with these issues, dealing with difficult issues where when I was first appointed in 2009, I was 38 years old. And I came into the position to deal with chiefs of police and members of law enforcement that had been police officers longer than I had been alive. And the initial shock of, this girl really, now being the chief law enforcement official in Passaic County, it was a learning curve for them. It was a learning curve for me. I now have had the opportunity to sit in this seat for 11 years, and any type of criminal justice reform and victim advocacy, I have been able to sit at that table. And so I thank Erica for making the space for me, because at this point, as a seasoned prosecutor, I can tell you that the conversations are daily. The settlement of Breonna Taylor is significant in so many ways, and it furthers the conversation when you are talking to chiefs of police in implementing reforms such as the use of body cameras, the use of tasers. Many times the resistance is not outright. It's not like, oh, well, we don't think that's a good idea. It's, well, we really don't have the money for that. And what I say to them all the time is, you're going to pay for it one way or the other. On the front end, with getting body cams, tasers, and other less lethal investigative tools, or you're going to pay for it on the back end with liability. And in our case, I have Patterson in my jurisdiction. And I can tell you that in the last 2 years, we have had 8 federal indictments. And being able to call my old office and say, I think you need to take a look at this, we are really working beyond our particular silos, and it's collaborative. New Jersey, as you know, is very progressive. We have a very progressive attorney general. So we're getting involved with the pivoting of the conversation. It's criminal justice reform, it's advocacy for victims, and all the other things that we don't really want to talk about, like poverty, like gender bias, like mental health, like addiction, like homelessness. These are all things that we see. And we also have communities, and speaking as a daughter of an immigrant family, the impact to immigrants that come to this country who are victimized as well, that are afraid of the police because they're afraid of being deported. So they'd rather be victimized than deported. And so that's a voice that I lend my voice to that conversation almost daily.
Absolutely. And I live here in the Atlanta metropolitan area, and that's a real issue in terms of the oppression and suppression of the immigrant communities. And people say, well, why don't they speak out? Well, it's easy to say that when you don't fear deportation.
Sure.
And so that's real talk, that's real dialogue. And we salute you for having that talk and that dialogue. It seems like it's been forever since we lost our dear brother, Freddie Gray. And since there was that discussion, but it's only been 5 years. And our next sister who we're going to bring on was at the helm and handled that whole situation, the indictments, with professionalism, by the law. She did what she needed to do under a lot of criticism. She was so young. She's still very young. I'd say I'm y'all's age, but the reality is If I've been representing a reverend for 32 years, I can't be 37. Just, in my mind, but I can't be. But Marilyn Mosby just took charge. And when we saw her on the international stage doing what so many couldn't do, sometimes you want to do it, but you have to have the facts and law, just couldn't do. That was a moment of glory, and we have to call it what it is. So, Marilyn, we thank you and salute you for what you've done, what you continue to do every single day. And we'd like to talk to you a little bit about what it was like for you, what it continues to be like for you. Having taken that bold move in your community when you had so much adversity nationally, police unions on your back, and threats. If you could share with the viewers and the listeners what that experience was and what your thoughts are going forward in your city.
So first and foremost, I just want to say thank you, CK. I appreciate all of the work that you do. As you started this whole session, recognizing and acknowledging the Reverend Jesse Jackson, what I've always understood and what I constantly reiterate, both my Kims will tell you, Kim Fox and Kim Garner, that it's always been greater than me, right? Like, it was never about Marilyn Mosby. It's about what Marilyn Mosby represents to dismantling this racist criminal justice system. And so I stand on the shoulders of Reverend Jesse Jackson, and I just want to say thank you for all that you've done. And I would be remiss. And Erica, I love you. I appreciate all that you do. Camila, thank you. You are representing. We are people of color. We are one. We need to recognize that. But I think when we look at also just the moment that we're in, CK, right now, right? Like, after the tragic loss of an iconic Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who was the architect, literally the architect of the elimination of gender discrimination in this country. Her death in and of itself changes the balance of power in the Supreme Court. And what is on the ballot right now is justice. And what I can tell you, what that means for not just us, but for our children and potentially our grandchildren, is justice is literally on the ballot in what is one of the most critical elections of our lifetime. And so before I speak about what justice looks like and what my experience was, I can tell you what justice does not look like, right? Justice does not look like failing to put on a turn signal and ending up dead. Justice does not look like allegedly selling loose cigarettes and ending up dead. Justice does not look like allegedly passing a $20 bill during a global pandemic for groceries and ending up dead. And so, justice isn't the refusal to see the humanity of Black people in this country. And so when I look at what's happening in this moment and in this time, Black people in this country, we're utterly sickened. We're Kim Gardner, Kim Fox, we're on a text thread, and we are utterly sickened by time and time again, the murders of Black people on camera at the hands of the police. And so what is this moment right now? I'm incredibly encouraged. I'm scared, right? Like, I need us to understand the importance of mobilization and getting out and voting and getting this man who has shown us the ability of changing the course of our country in a matter of 4 years. He has taken regression to a whole nother point. So I'm encouraged that, according to the AP polls, the veil of ignorance has been lifted from Americans in this country, particularly white Americans, regarding race relations and police brutality against Black people in this country, and that our perceptions have, in essence, shifted and changed since 5 years ago. As you have highlighted, 5 years ago, it was a mere 5 years ago, since I charged police officers with the death of an innocent 25-year-old Black man who made eye contact with police in a high crime neighborhood, who was unconstitutionally arrested. placed into a metal wagon, head first, feet shackled and handcuffed, and whose pleas, after his spine was partially severed in the back of that wagon, his pleas for medical attention were ignored. I'm encouraged that those perceptions have been shifted. I'm encouraged that Black Lives Matter is no longer a controversial term, right? Where people are now recognizing that in order for every life to matter, ours has to matter as well. But we have so much more work to do. And so I think that in this moment, you know, when we talk about the progressive prosecutor movement, where you have prosecutors like my sisters, and not just in law, but my sisters in life, Kim Garner and Kim Foxx, you know, we're succeeding because voters, the community, has, both of them just got reelected overwhelmingly. I got reelected overwhelmingly, right? Voters are paying attention to these races when previously we were just going in and electing these individuals with these tough on crime approaches. 79% of the individuals making the decisions in this country are white males. 95% of the prosecutors in this country are white. We represent a mere 1% of all elected prosecutors of color. That's unacceptable. And so what is this moment speaking to? I think that it's time. We got work to do. We have a lot of work to do, but I'm encouraged. I'm encouraged because with the death of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, we understand that she's passed the baton and the mantle of justice, and the fight is now on us. And so we will do what we need to do to continue to fight, and we will support each other because that's what this is about, representing 1% of all elected prosecutors in this country.
Magnificent. Yes, Reverend. I'm just going to add.
We must know each other's story.
Yes.
This call should be like at least a monthly call. We went to Minnesota right after George Floyd had been killed, met with the county prosecutor, who was in fact the state's attorney, explaining why they couldn't indict the police. They couldn't even charge them. And that is right. And the next day, they shifted the case to Keith Ellison. Keith indicted 4 of them, the first time a white had been indicted for killing a black in history of Minnesota. Yeah, he's under 5, but Keith is the reason why George Floyd's killer is in jail. Those positions you guys are taking matter. We must know enough about what each other's doing to come to each other's rescue. Because when you hit these bumps in the road, you're up and let Rainbow know we'll come and campaign for you. Mobilize ministers where you live, part of what Reverend Yeary does. If we know you're in trouble in Baltimore or New Jersey, St. Louis, if we know what you're doing, we'll come to your rescue. We must know each other's story. Thank you very much.
Can I just say one point, just make one point? Reverend Jackson, you have come to my rescue on so many occasions. And let me just say, you know, being a prosecutor, making the decisions we make the decision of who's going to be charged, what they're going to be charged with, what sentence recommendations we're going to make, you know, whether a person gets into the criminal justice system in the first place. It was being one of the first in the country to attempt to hold police officers accountable. You were at the forefront of that support. And so I thank you from the bottom of my heart because it's been consistent. It's not just with me, it's with Kim Foxx, it's with Kim Gardner, it's with Aramis Ayala, it's with all of us. And the vitriol and the hate that we receive as Black women attempting to implement equal justice in this country. And not just Black women, people of color. Camila, you are one of us. And I'm sure that you have gotten that hate and that pushback as well, right? People of color, we are one. And so I have to say thank you, not just for being that example for all of us, but for stepping up when so many others were afraid to step up and support us in the way that you have.
Absolutely, absolutely, Reverend. And Reverend, thank you so much for continuing to inspire us in this debate and being there and having been there for all of us in our struggles over the years. And one thing that we have to realize is we've got 46 days, 46 days, just 46, less than 50, more than 45, 46 days left until November 3rd. We have the birthplace of the civil rights movement, where Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat to a Black man. And here we have the district attorney for the largest county in Alabama, Danny Carr, who's joining us here today. I mean, you talk about history. We're so happy to have you here. And we wanted you to be able to comment on just your journey as a top law enforcement officer in Jefferson County, the deep South, the deep, deep to the deep of the deep South. And we know the systemic racism of the judicial system. Do you have any comments on this debate and on this discussion? But from your standpoint, from deep down Alabama, because we know I'm in Atlanta, but Alabama is a different animal.
Oh, yes. Let me first say, thank you for including me in this discussion. And I've watched Kim Garner and Kim Fox and Marilyn Mosby and all of those three strong African-American women leading the way. And Camellia, it's wonderful to hear your story. But I'm getting goosebumps here because I made sure my daughter, who just graduated from Auburn University, is about to start law school. I wanted her to hear this and to see these women and to understand that, don't ever let anybody tell you what you can or can't do and how strong you can or can't be just because you're a woman who's an African-American woman. So let me just first say thank you to all of the women on here who are leading the way. And Reverend Jackson, thank you. I'm down here in the deep South in Alabama. I'm just a blue dot in a big red state. And I'm here because I'm standing on the shoulders of men like you, Reverend Jackson. And you may not remember, but yourself and I think Mr. Year may have come down here to Winona High School to a unity breakfast that you was the speaker at years ago when my mom retired, but she was the principal. And Reverend Tommy Lewis, who I know is a good friend of yours, and Courtney French and all of them, they want me to tell you hello. And obviously, Mr. Year, they're looking forward to you coming, I think, to the National Baptist Convention now in January, maybe. But my journey was a bit different because being down here in the South, being down here where, honestly, and I know Marilyn and Kim and some of y'all may know that one of my compadres or counterparts in crime is Lenise Washington. And I know she's listening and she's a dear, dear friend, and we work hard and very well together at trying to change what's going on down here in the Deep South. Now, one of the biggest issues for me was that when I was appointed district attorney, we'd never had, number one, a Black person in this position, but number two, we never even had a liberal Democrat in this position. All of these years, it was a conservative office ran by conservative white men, to be honest. And we had a guy to win an election named Charles Todd Henderson, and immediately after the election, he was indicted. Immediately. He was a Democrat, he was a white male, but he was indicted. The very next day, he was indicted for perjury and for something that happened over in domestic relations court. And I was called out of grand jury because a lot of people don't know, I've been only elected here 2 years, but I served 17 years as an assistant. So I know the daily grind. So I was called across the street, appointed by our presiding judge. And the next thing you know, I'm DA pro tem. Where a year goes by, there's a trial, and Todd Henderson is convicted. And he's actually sentenced to jail. I then go up to the governor's office, which we all know how that went. It was the quickest interview I've ever had in my life. They didn't even open up the stuff and look at, all the stuff I prepared. And the inference was that if you agree to certain things we want you to agree to, maybe even run as a Republican, we'll appoint you. But when I decided I wouldn't do it, obviously, a week later, while I'm doing the job, while I'm running the office, while both sides of the aisle are saying this man is the man for the job, I didn't even get a courtesy call. Next thing you know in the news, there's a report that they appoint a guy who's here in his office, a white male who's been here about 30 years as district attorney. So I drove here and gathered my stuff, and decided at that point that I'm going to run for it. And I ran for it, and I was successful overwhelmingly. And here I am now. But one of the things I often talk about is, what good are people telling me, well, hey, you're the first countywide, you're the first this, you're the first that. That's okay, but if you're the first and you're not doing anything of substance, it doesn't matter. So the question is, what are you doing? What are you bringing to the table to change the system here in Alabama? For instance, when I got here, there was a law that says that there were several people in our jail that got life without parole because of the amount of pills they had. Life without parole for the amount of pills that you had, even with no prior felony convictions. We looked at those cases and we agreed to change those cases. And those individuals have now been released. But one of the things that were more important to me was, because I'm from the hood, I'm from a single parent home. Most of my friends are in prison or dead. My little brother was murdered the year before he got ready to go to the University of Alabama. He was gunned down because they wanted the car that he was in. They took the car and killed him and burned the car up. So I understand the hood. I'm from that area. I understand the distrust with police. So how do you address the pipeline in prison? Because a lot of people don't realize it's real. If you drop out of school, if you're not rich or have a skill, you're going to end up in the car with somebody with a gun. You're going to end up doing drugs or having someone put drugs in your hand. So we've addressed the pipeline in prison through what's called the Helping Families Initiative. And we're in all 25 schools. And what we do, we interact with those kids every day. And if there's chronic absenteeism involved, we do a home assessment, and then we find out what is the root cause of this kid not going to school. And we provide those wraparound services for that kid, because we know you can't help the kid unless you help the family. So we make sure that we provide those services and have everybody at the table. And one other thing that I thought was important, I got a lot of flack about doing something that I did here called the Second Chance Job Fair. And people ask me, you're the DA, why would you do a job fair? I understand that unless you change the trajectory of a person's life, that's how you fight crime. So what we did was, we got people who have been convicted of felonies, and I paid for it out of my pocket, rented a building downtown. We had over 585 guys show up. We employed 152 that day with meaningful employment, guys who have been in the system, which was important, which was very important. And lastly, and I don't want to get too far ahead, but Lanice and I proposed something called cite and release as it relates to marijuana, because I heard people talking about marijuana. And what we did was said, hey, since we don't have home rule here, because again, we're in Alabama, we decided a person shouldn't be arrested for marijuana possession, that it should be treated like a traffic ticket. Give them a ticket, let them go on, they can answer it in court later. And you would have thought I spit in someone's face with the response we got back. So all the things that we're doing here together, forming the first conviction review unit here, Lanice and I, all the things that we're doing down here in the South, believe me, some of the emails I get, and of course, just like y'all, I wasn't endorsed by the Chiefs Association or none of that. But at the end of the day, I believe that God orders your steps and that he bless you because he knows that you're going to be a blessing to others. And I know that I have a duty because of guys like Reverend Jesse Jackson, and because of the other people here, Reverend Shuttlesworth, all the people whose shoulders I stand on, to make a difference and do something substantively, not just be a warm body in the position, but do something substantively to change the dynamic of our criminal justice system here in the Deep South. And I'm honored to be in this position. I'm going to keep fighting the good fight. I'm going to keep doing things different. I know people don't like change, but change is inevitable and change has come. And I will keep fighting this good fight. So thank you all for doing what you do. I'm so blessed and honored to be with each of you. God bless you. Thank you.
And thank you. And change has come. And thank you so much for all that you do. And thank you for bringing your daughter and the perspective, bring your daughter into the picture, because the only way that we can really see the change with the gender is in our families. That's for right. Fathers to say, for mothers to say, no, we can't do it this way. Yes. So we applaud you for that and thank you for that.
Absolutely.
Now, next we have a bad sister. We just have to call it what it is. A bad sister who took on the governor of Missouri. I mean, she just took on the governor, blaming her for the city of St. Louis homicide. And she went ahead and just said, no, enough is enough.
Yeah.
Sick and tired of being sick and tired. It ain't gonna happen no more. I'm done, through. Talk to the hand, all of that. And she did it with such grace. And every single day, when I saw Kimberly Garner on TV, because she was on TV all the time, I felt like saying power to the people, just walking up in the morning, just, you know what I mean? How you feel that way. Actually, I felt that way about all of y'all. When I saw you all, when I've seen you all on TV fighting the fight, to take on the police unions like you all have, and to sue the police unions. And we know the life threats that go along with doing the things that you all do every day. But to just take on the state and the governor, and Mound City Bar was behind you, and to do the things that you've done, to be the first African-American circuit attorney in St. Louis, where you practiced, and just to do all the things that you've done. Kimberly Garner, we just want to hear from you, because there's so many, like the other panelists here, so many young women. St. Louis, I'm from Buffalo, New York originally. St. Louis is kind of like Buffalo. It's a tough city. It's a tough city. And so for you to do what you've done, there are millions of young girls and young boys who look and say, yes, I want to do that too. And we know the hell that you've caught. So we just wanted to ask you just a bit about what you think, what you feel the future holds in your town and in this country as it relates to policing reforms, having taken on those police unions and the governor. You just took them on and said, this is the way it's going to be.
No.
First of all, I'm honored to be here. I'm humble because I'm starstruck to see Reverend Jesse Jackson. I just want to say thank you. I've met you many times. You've done a lot. You inspired me. Miss C.K. Hotler, Miss Erica Booker, my sisters in life, as well as the struggle, Kim Fox, Marilyn Mosby, and Mr. Danny Carr. I'm honored because I met him one time. It was amazing when we went to Alabama, and I know how, he's doing a lot of good work. And nice meeting Miss Camelia Valdez, and just want to say thank you so much for being here and allowing me to speak, but and all the reverends. Well, I'm kind of like to say and start with Missouri. Even though we're considered Midwest, I call us Mississippi, Missouri, Alabama. And Mr. Danny Carr can kind of understand what I'm speaking of, because when you are the first circuit attorney in the city of St. Louis, and have to deal with the status quo individuals who want to hold on to a way of life, a way of doing things unchecked. And you have to fight the police unions, you have to fight the powerful few. You find when you hold people accountable, like you hold everyone else accountable, you find that these attacks are so strategic, they're coordinated, and they're meant for you to fail. And then you learn how entrenched systemic racism and the status quo and the powerful few are. And so with the what I am hopeful of with everyone on this call, everyone who is doing the good work, what I'm hopeful of, we're going to continue to fight to do the work. But what I worry about is that we have powerful few, from President Donald Trump, Attorney General William Barr, and governors, like in my state, Governor Mike Parson, as well as Senator Josh Hawley, Attorney General Eric Schmidt, who want to inject themselves into the discretion of local prosecutors, and how they're using and weaponizing the rule of law to silence the will of people and to stop criminal justice reform. And that is where the future is going if we do not stop this. And we have to have people like ourselves and many people around the country come together to really address, when you talk about defunding police, and you talk about, and then you have people saying you're anti-police. When you have President Donald Trump saying that, and William Barr saying that progressive prosecutors are these anarchists, and we are these tyrants, and we are causing violent crimes, and they call out St. Louis, they call out Chicago, they call out democratic cities and say we are the cause for violent crime. We have to stop this rhetoric of the law has been used to weaponize certain groups, and how we allow the powerful few to continue to put out this misinformation that the tough on crime, mass incarceration approach has failed us all. It's decimated our communities, it's deteriorated our trust in the whole integrity of the criminal justice system or the legal system. It's eroded relationships for people who are afraid to come outside, because the same person that is supposed to serve and protect are those individuals that violate the trust and dehumanize everyday individuals who just want the respect and dignity that everyone deserves. We have to understand that we are in a civil rights movement and moment, that we have to not only protect the rule of law, but we have to protect the integrity of the prosecutor's job. And we have to protect reform-minded prosecutors to do their job, because with this message and with this platform, we are scrutinized. They're trying to, in the state of Missouri, take over my jurisdiction by concurrent jurisdiction with the Attorney General. And that failed just this week, but it's coming back in January. So they're having that they're going to use that somehow they weaponize the law against the local elected prosecutor to usurp the will of the people who want reform, who voted August 4th for me overwhelmingly, 61%. And I'm still running November 3rd, but they're going to continue to fight. But we need people in this battle to help us fight, because we cannot do it alone. We're not saying we're doing it alone, but there's many strategic legal methods that they're using that we are limited in what we have is in terms of legal toolbox and resources to continue some of these fights. And that's why we need young men and women who want to share this struggle with us, who want to come to our offices and help fight. We need legal support outside to see what's happening in Alabama and Mississippi and hearing some of the egregious issues that we have. And we have to reform police accountability, because at the very central of violent crime in the city of St. Louis or around this nation, if we don't have adequate policing and appropriate policing, it doesn't matter how many prosecutors you have or convictions you have. People are not going to come forward because they're afraid of the system, mistrust with the system. The number one reason why we cannot hold a violent individual accountable who preys on the community. And we continue to fail to talk about everybody has access to a gun. Missouri is an open carry, permitless, stand your ground state. But they talk about gun violence, but we give everyone access to a gun. And so we need to also check the NRA and all these gun lobbyists that basically pimp the federal government, the president, all the way to every certain groups, that they are basically dealing this dangerous tool in our cities, and then they want to blame us for violent crime. So I have hope that we, in spite of all this, people are saying enough is enough, because they saw the death of Mr. George Floyd, the 8 minutes and 46 seconds that led to his murder, and everybody is appalled because the community was screaming to stop, and people who fail to protect and serve and do their job is being charged. And we have Breonna Taylor's, settlement, and we have many others to come. But we have to address the outsized, overreach, overbroad tentacles of the FOP, the police unions that actually are dangerous, that cause more violence in communities that need police the most, that put police in harm and actually put prosecutors in harm, because we are fighting a big fight, but we need a lot of people's help. So thank you.
Oh, well, thank you so much for your magnificent comments. And as yes, Reverend. Yes, Reverend.
We must, as a community, seek equal protection, not a break. We have our own behavior cannot put you in the bind of having to defend the indefensible. We have an obligation to ask you for equal protection, adequate protection. We cannot put you in the bind of our own behavior, which is illicit and wrong. And so, and ministers and others who come up and support you must be able to interpret what you do and why you do what you do. I cannot say enough, Marilyn, what it means to me to be able to say that Reverend Todd Yeager in Baltimore and other guys who will interpret what you do, because if you do it and we don't understand what you're doing, like you can't let all of us out unless all of us want to do the right thing. After, where did Black Lives Matter come from? Killing in Charleston, and they took the Ruth out, got him a hamburger on the way to jail. Diallo killed 41 times, and others killed. And finally, in Missouri, police killed and walked away and said, don't we matter? And so we must argue that we matter. We've seen heinous crimes since George Floyd that rivals what happened to George Floyd, really, in Rochester and stuff like that. So we stand with you, but I cannot say enough, it's repetitious. We need to know at least once a month what you're doing, what you're up against, so we can mobilize the community to come to your rescue. You stand between, after slavery, the police became the guardians of the system.
Mm-hmm.
They're out of the way of the system. It's not, we focus a lot on police. Police, the epidemic, said out of the way of they protect the system. Those who really call these shots are behind the walls. Police have been the de facto military, and the FOP is out of control in Chicago. I mean, every time the mayor Kim makes a move, the FOP fight for the right for them to kill people. And when Bush made the move in Atlanta, Georgia, police, 50 of them rebelled, went on all. So we know about police rebelling against you. And I cannot say, that we must be prepared to defend you publicly.
Absolutely.
And so can I just add one point, Reverend Jesse Jackson, you were absolutely right about the police being the defenders of a system, but we need to call it what it is. It's a system of white supremacy, right? Like, so if we look at our history, and Danny, I went to Tuskegee University, so Alabama all the way. But when we look at our history from slavery and, the enforcement of the slave codes to, Jim Crow to, civil rights movement, to this war on drugs that we now recognize, and it has been acknowledged on the record, was really a war on Black people. It is this system of white supremacy that is at issue, that everybody is fearful to say, but I'm not afraid to say. It's not a system, right? It's a system. There's a reason why people are willing to sacrifice their lives and not wearing masks, and are willing to sacrifice their children. It is to ensure that we are keeping this system of white supremacy in place. And so, as Kim Garner has so eloquently already articulated, we need your help, right? Because we, as progressive prosecutors in this country, are under attack. And when we talk about police reform, they want to come for the progressive prosecutors first. So right now, I have to go and get prepared for a state legislature where I have to argue why it makes no sense for them to take my power to prosecute police misconduct and police use of force and police shootings away from me, and to provide it to a state prosecutor who is appointed by the Republican governor. And they want to say, we want to take politics away from it. No, you want to take it away from the people who have elected me to do my job and to apply one standard of justice. So understanding and recognizing it's not on the prosecutor, right? Like, at the end of the day, we need independent police investigations. As a prosecutor, your case is only as good as that investigation. We do need your support. We need your advocacy. And it's happening not just in Baltimore City, but in every city where you have progressive prosecutors who are saying, hey, we are going to take a holistic approach. We're going to break the school to prison pipeline. We're going to ensure we get to young people before they get to the criminal justice system. We're going to ensure that we're giving people second chances. This is happening all across this country. And so, yes, please pay attention. Please pay attention, not just nationally, but locally. Local politics is everything.
Marilyn, can I just say this in response to you? You need to tell them how they weaponize the legal system against us, that we are paying thousands of dollars to defend our we are being prosecuted like we are defendants, but it's Black female progressive prosecutors. And people do not understand what Kim Foxx and Marilyn Mosby and Kim Gardner, and I know Danny Carr is going through it in Alabama because I'm here. They are taking our livelihood and making it a spectacle and saying we are the problem. And guess what? You talk about the governor. I'm actually a witness in a case that I did nothing wrong, and I'm gonna have to defend myself legally to actually be able to keep my bar license for something that, because I treated a person who committed a crime in my jurisdiction that happened to have a title of a governor like everybody else and did my job, I am also a witness that they were trying to charge me and actually probably going to try to make up something. And the whole system is rigged, from the police investigation to the special prosecutor to actually the judges, and then the judges. And then all by the way, and they say you got to defend yourself with your own. Oh, they excluded all my lawyers. They won't pay my lawyers. So people don't understand what we're going through. And I'm passionate because people don't know. It's not that we're saying we're victims. We're not victims, but we need people to pay attention, because we need Thurgood Marshall 2020 to come down here and defend us if you want us to continue to do this work.
I just
absolutely right.
If I could jump in on that just real quick, because she said it. If you think about it, I've been the subject of an 18-month special prosecutor investigation for how I use my prosecutorial discretion. Kim has been the subject of a special prosecutor. Marilyn is still in court tied up about how she exercised her discretion. And I think they're right. This isn't just like some broad issue of progressive prosecutors. There is a targeted attack on Black women who do this work. And if we don't call it what it is, if we don't, because it does drain you. For 18 months, my credibility had been challenged. My integrity had been challenged. And this is the tool that they use to undermine. They will try to undermine that people who look like me and Marilyn and Kim can't do our jobs. It's about a competency issue. And for 18 months, and I had to defend myself against that for a finding that came out to say that I had done nothing wrong. But the fact that I had to tussle with that, the editorial boards wrote dozens of stories about it. And I've seen this across the country, whether it's Aramis with how she handled death penalty cases. And so it's not even just, and I just want to be clear, I get fired up about it too, Kim. That's why we shouldn't be doing these panels this early in the morning. Because it's not just about defending Marilyn alone or Kim Garner alone. This is a targeted attack. When William Barr, the attorney general for this president, goes into cities and says the things that he says about Baltimore, about St. Louis, about Chicago, it's not even dog whistling. He is picking cities that are run or have Black women prosecutors and laying at their feet violence and crime. Where at the same time, we then become under attack for using our discretion. And this attorney general can intervene in Roger Stone, can intervene and Michael Flynn, can fire.
We lost you, Kim.
Yeah.
CK.
Yes, Reverend Jackson.
Except for Chicago, all your cities police have the right to live in suburbs, police and firemen. And in Baltimore, for some police live in Appalachia.
No, 80% of the police department don't live in the city of Baltimore. Not some, 80%.
And that's they fought for the right to take away loot the best jobs. Police, teachers, firemen job, and take the tax base and buy houses in suburbs. They come in with a hand on the gun, half scared every day, because they come as occupiers, not as neighbors. So that's some structural stuff we must grapple with. We were on a residency in Rochester when the police chief resigned and the mayor's in trouble up there. It's important because they don't live in Rochester.
Right.
When that guy was on the ground in the ice, naked, 9 police, all white, sent over him. in Kenosha, 206.6 police, 9 black, 155 and 2 black. So part of our work is to make sure that the structural change, which Todd spoke a lot on Louisville, was like a structural change. You'll find out an uneven playing figure. That's part of the project. Todd, you speak to this, please.
Todd?
Yeah, I was kind of reading the script, so Reverend always catches you in the moment. I think it's important that when we look at the structural conditions that make you all's jobs more difficult, is you're downstream from a lot of deficits that are upstream. When we look at broken windows policing, we often deal with that as a corrective instead of fixing the windows in the first place, right? Making sure that there's proper capital investment, that you have adequate schools, that you make sure that you have folks being able to make a living wage, on and on and on. And so there are some comprehensive issues that are contributing to the difficulty that falls firmly on your shoulders. And then when you take a situation like we see nationally with cannabis, we take that which was once criminal, and now some folks are trying to treat it as if it's clinical, and then still others are treating it as if it's recreational. The economic harm that has been imposed on families and communities over time becomes too intractable for you all to be able to fix without there being some economic remedy, i.e. reparations, to make sure that that happens. And so what is really being pushed back on is that with the autonomy and the discretion, that's the word that's been used, that you all have, you are undermining an economic system that has been profoundly imposed on this nation from its very beginning. I'll go ahead and drop this in here now. Kim Garner is in St. Louis County. One of the first things I found out that was so profound to me is that you have the Gateway Arch right there in downtown, and it's called the Gateway to America. But that's not the marker that impressed me. In the shadows of the Gateway Arch is a small federal courthouse that has historical significance to the mindset of America, because it is in that courthouse, in the shadow of the Gateway Arches, where the decision in the Dred Scott v. Sanford decision was actually rendered. And so when we think about the issue, everybody agrees, at least most folks, except kind of Trump nominees, that the Dred Scott decision is bad law. But what we have seen is you can still get rid of bad law, air quotes, and still create a system based on the mindset behind that bad law. First of all, that we did not have standing, right? And that property rights were imposed upon us as a right inherited from England, and that there were no rights that any person of color had that a white person was bound to respect. And so that has been perpetuated over and over and over again in a way that means that we've got to make sure that we remain vigilant, but also resilient and persistent to change these structural impediments. And then when it comes to contract rights, we got to talk about this as it relates to the FOP. Contract rights then create this kind of sidebar discussion that is imposed on us without the right of being included in the negotiation in the first place. So while we're not party to the contract, we're affected by the contract. And in order to change it, because we're not party to the contract, we then have to influence those who are actually parties to the contract, i.e. the elected officials. And so we've got to make sure that while we need to know when every FOP contract is going to expire, who's going to be negotiating it, when those issues come to impasse, make them declare impasse, and not just find these ways to kind of massage and nuance the language in FOP contracts that gives exclusive sets of rights that no one else would ever have anywhere in the country except those who claim that they are there to promote public safety. We've got to make sure that all of these different areas are monitored kind of simultaneously. You all have a tremendous responsibility, but it's up to the rest of us to make sure that we keep our eyes on who's doing the dealing and who's doing the doling. But we got to make sure that we're the ones who are doing the voting, because we have an interest in what goes down on paper. So thank you.
To that point, Reverend Yeary, let me just say that they are looking to repeal the Law Enforcement Bill of Rights. Senator Will Smith is going to be having this debate on Thursday. I hope to see you, because I'm going to be there. And then on Wednesday, they're looking to take my power away from being able to prosecute police officers and assigning that authority and that power to the state prosecutor who was appointed by the governor. So need you.
I'm going to call you after this call. Tell Nick I'm going to need about 15 minutes and tell the girls to just hang loose. I won't keep you long.
Thank you, Reverend.
Police patrol the system. They don't control it. They're the outer layer. But the controllers, they have some obligation to create conditions on that make sense for you to operate in. I'm sorry, make your point.
Absolutely, absolutely. Now, we have a lot of questions from the audience, but I just want to pose this question to all of you. I am president of the National Bar, and I represent 66,000 Black lawyers in this country. If you feel, because I know that we can as an organization, that there's something that we can do to support what you are doing, you must let us know, let me know. So I want y'all to ponder that and think about that. And I'm going to go to some of the questions in the audience. Okay, so first of all, the audience is just, there's so much support. We have a question from a citizen who said, how can they support you all as prosecutors, as citizens? How can they support you? That's one question. So if any of you want to address just the people, everyday people in the community, how can they support you? Because they do support you. So what can they do specifically?
So can I just answer that really quickly? I just stated how, as like a community, you can be paying attention to these issues that are directly going to impact us as prosecutors in our discretion. Right now, in the state of Maryland, the Senate has introduced a bill that would take away my power to be able to prosecute police. Since Freddie Gray, we have prosecuted and convicted 22 police officers, right? Because of that accountability, which led to exposure, that exposure ultimately led to reform in the city of Baltimore. We have use of force, de-escalation policies. We have, these different sort of affirmative responsibilities to intervene when your fellow officer crosses the line. There are so many tangible sort of reforms that we can point to, but right now we have state legislators that are looking to undermine our authority. Please, they are setting up a public hearing on Wednesday. They're trying to take away my power to be able to prosecute police. On Thursday, we need to talk about the Law Enforcement Bill of Rights that ties the police department's hands, that are keeping these bad officers on the payroll, and yet we are paying for these officers to continue to humiliate and to harass us and to delegitimize, as my sister eloquently stated, this system of criminal justice reform in our city. So we need you to pay attention to that. And then, I know that you're not a political organization, but I just need to be real with you. When we talk about the unions, one of these police unions give labor unions an extremely bad name. They are extremely political. When I prosecuted the police officers in Freddie Gray, they put me on the front cover of their police union and said, "The wolf that lurks." They are politically active and engaged, and they fund these police unions in a way that they will put people in a position to oppose you. My Kim Fox just had $1 million campaign where she was fighting against somebody who was supported by the police union. So what can you do? You can pay attention to the local politics and ensure that when they come for us, that we have support, and it's not just us advocating for ourselves. And two, you can support us monetarily. This is not going to our pocket, right? This is ensuring that we can fight against the machine that is fighting against us, because they understand the larger picture.
Is that when you say support you, in Baltimore, do people need to show up at the hearing? Do they need to protest? How could this person wants to know how specifically?
You can sign up right now. The Senate is having, in the state of Maryland, is having public sign-ups right now as we speak for Wednesday and Thursday. Thursday is the repeal of the Law Enforcement Bill of Rights, and Wednesday is the law that they are looking to take away my power and discretion and assign it to an politically appointed position. We need you to come and to advocate on our behalf. That's one. And then two, you can go to our websites, understanding the work that we've put in. I have one of the most progressive marijuana policies in the country. We don't prosecute possession of marijuana to spite despite the amount and despite criminal record, right? Like, we have to understand the work that is being done. And so if you go to our individual websites, we need your support. It was a struggle for me to win re-election because I had to go all across this country. Thank you, Reverend Jackson, who was supportive of me, to raise money. It's like pulling teeth. The Republicans and conservatives get the importance of funding their people in these positions that are going to implement their agenda. We, as progressives, understanding the importance of what's at stake in this nation in this moment, also need to understand the importance of funding these types of candidates. William Barr, there's a reason why he's attacking us the way that he is.
Okay. The reason I say we need to have this call at least once a month, because we vote top of ticket Biden against Trump. We missed the stuff by which you were directed. There's more pressure on you than there is on top of the ticket. Because they didn't want you elected. Now you are elected, they want to take away your power. You caught with the symbolism without the substance of power. And so in St. Louis, if you're in trouble, Reverend Bobo and our allies in St. Louis and disc jockeys, we know what's going to come to your rescue. Because you take a guy like Todd Urenbaugh, he's an enlightened minister and lawyer. A lot of times ministers don't mean no harm, they don't know what's happening. So if we meet, I'm urging we meet once a month. I hope I can get a witness on that to talk about what's happening in your town, because clearly these positions are very threatening to the arrangement.
Yeah. Another question on Facebook. My son was murdered March 4th of 2016. We're still waiting on justice. How do cases get added to your cold case unit?
I'll take a stab at that. One, we get cases in Cook County, if this is a Cook County resident, that comes to us from our law enforcement partners. And so if we haven't received the case from the police, then it's difficult for us to even have a place to start. If you live in Cook County and you want our cold case unit to look at your case, go to the cookcountystatesattorney.org website. And you can send an email and we can have someone from our victim witness unit be in touch with you so that we can make arrangements to get that type of information. But I think, again, from an education standpoint, prosecutors get their cases from police. We rarely are in a position to independently, particularly with homicides, have that information that does not come from police. So if you're waiting to hear back from a detective, if you're waiting to hear back from someone in law enforcement and haven't, you can reach out to us and we can work with you to see and get answers to see if we're in a position to have that case go to our cold case unit.
Let me just add, if you're an Alabama resident, that I echo the sentiments of Kim. You know, this office, we don't have the resources, honestly, at this point to actually investigate those cases ourselves. But what we do is that if it's a cold case, you hadn't heard anything, or you don't know the status of it, or no one has followed up with you, then I will reach out to that law enforcement agency and find out myself what the status is, what the issues are, what's going on, to make sure that there's at least that case is still being worked, or at least there's some type of finality as relates to answering the questions or issues that the family may have.
Okay. Another question.
In Montgomery, Attorney Courtney French in Birmingham, a good brother, life as a judge, recommended that Danny be a part of this discussion. Reverend Thomas Lewis on the phone, I understand, I'll do this as well. I'm simply saying that we need to know what's happening where you are to mobilize our forces. Most people, once you get the job, they think the job is self-running. You run a hit and run every day.
That's right.
We need to know what's happening, Danny.
Sir, thank you.
Another question on Facebook. As a white female second-year attorney that supports Black Lives Movement openly, I too face backlash. Any suggestions on how to deal with this type of backlash?
I mean, I think you have to really, you supporting whatever you support is about fairness and justice. And I think that, we have to have real conversations about systemic racism. We have to have conversations about how the system that we are a part of has caused devastation and destruction in communities of people who look like us and people of color, how mass incarceration has made all of us less safe. So I think that, I hate when people put these monikers, you know, when they say progressive prosecutors, I don't like it. I mean, it's not that I don't like being labeled a progressive prosecutor, because we are ministers of justice to pursue justice, not merely convictions. And we're just bringing the prosecutor's office back to where it should have been day one, since wherever it existed, but it has not been. And so I think we have to have real conversations. We have to really have people like yourself over these national legal organizations, really educate the community and have a PSA of fairness and justice. Understand what a prosecutor does. A lot of people think we are solving every case that happens in our jurisdictions. If somebody doesn't hear anything, they're looking at us and saying, well, you're not doing anything. A lot of times these police officers are preying on the ignorance of people who are afraid, do not know and understand, and they put that blame on us. If we don't have evidence, we cannot charge, no matter how awful it is. If we have certain laws like stand your ground in my state, you can actually have a self-defense claim where you can shoot to kill someone, and that'll be an actual justified shooting, like in police officer cases. So we need you guys to break down in PSA what we want to see in our communities, and understanding the legal process, not in a legalese way, but understand the power of a prosecutor, understand what you should hold us accountable for, but continue to stop this divide of fear and racist animus that we have because we're African American, or we're a person of color, or we're Latina, whatever, because they're saying that we share with criminal activity. We are part of letting criminals go. When we live in these communities, that a criminal can actually hurt and harm our family members just like anybody else. We're not immune from violence. So hopefully you guys will work to have PSAs to educate people on this new idea of social justice.
And the only thing I would add to that is that we have to be bold and we have to be courageous, right? Like, even if it makes us uncomfortable. So it means being comfortable in the uncomfortable, right? You know, I went to a predominantly all white school. I was part of one of the longest standing desegregation programs in the country. At 6 years old, I was the only Black child in the entire school. And so what I had to learn very early on is that it wasn't like the negative sort of perceptions weren't indicative of me. It was indicative, or the maliciousness of that individual, right? It was due to a lack of exposure. And you being a white person, right, with the privilege that you exhibit just because you're a white person, it's human nature to be able to associate with those that are like you. And so if you're in a way if you're in the position to be able to educate an individual that you have an association with in a way that they would not otherwise have that experience, you have to be bold enough and courageous enough to do it. And you have to understand the importance of being uncomfortable and comfortable, take it back, comfortable in an uncomfortable situation.
And just to add on to that, from National Black Prosecutors Association, being able to immerse yourself in that uncomfortable, come to these organizations like ourselves so that we can have these conversations. We just had a virtual conference where it was talked about the state of the Black prosecutor, empowered, emboldened to change that narrative. We have conferences every single year. Next year is our 37th conference in Chicago in August. And so come to our events so that we can have these conversations so that you can know how to approach the situation and how to deal with it as well.
Well, I want you guys, right now, join Rainbow Push Coalition. I want you to go to rainbowpush.org, join the Rainbow Push. When some have me call Reverend Todd, how can you talk?
My email address is S as in Sam, T as in Tom, YEARY, ST Yeary at rainbowpush.org. Rainbow Push is all one word.
Okay.
For example, we found out, and I was in Minnesota the night the riot broke out. When the police headquarters burned down, it was so surgical. I know local folks did not burn it down. But the groups in St. Louis and Louisville and Baltimore, these hit squads of sorts. In Chicago, they integrate into the crowd and they throw the rocks and our kids run in the store. Oh, in Chicago, the police did a kind of blue flu showdown. No one wrote about it. If I got 50 police outside the store and somebody break in the store, I'm making something going to something when they come out. Got people running in the store and come out with a U-Haul and they don't even follow them. It's kind of blue slowdown by the police, plus these violent hit squads in town. So your job is even more complicated than Maryland than the narrative is. Some of these riots that took place were not local people riots. These were very planned riots by right-wingers. Very planned hit squads by these guys.
I think, Amelia, did you want to make a comment as well?
The one thing, thank you. The one thing that Reverend Jackson brought up that I have found tremendously helpful is the ability to develop allies by being a part of different organizations. For example, I'm the chair of the Hispanic National Bar's Law Enforcement Reform and Racial Justice Committee, and involved with the American Bar Association, because we know what the issues are as people of color. If there's something going on with me, you best believe that my sorors are front and center, because they're watching what I'm doing. They know what I'm working on. The majority of what we're talking about needs to be legislated. If there's a bill, if there's a gap, we as law enforcement executives, all we can do is enforce the law. But the actual changing of the laws requires us to be involved with legislators that are like-minded, that understand that if something is happening, for example, in a city, it does impact the suburbs, and it's being able to build those allies during peacetime. And we haven't been at peace for a long time, but being able to deploy different organizations to lend their support to getting bills passed, getting legislation unstalled where it gets stuck. Let us help each other unstick that piece of legislation. That is tremendously helpful, because a lot of what we do, we know these issues as people of color and as public servants of color, because we have to deal with them, but it's establishing and giving other people assignments in the struggle. Not everybody is meant to carry the picket sign. Some people have to make calls. Some people have to give money. Some people have to reach out. So not all of us need to deploy the same types of tools in the struggle, but we need to be mindful that it's going to take all of us, people of color and not, women and not, and men, to be able to talk about what's really happening and really push in areas that we can't push. I'm appointed, so I don't have the same pressures as my colleagues that have to run for office. I have different pressures, especially because I'm independent, so I'm not a Republican or a Democrat. So in order for me to stay in this job, my work has to be able to speak to both Republicans and Democrats. So being able to really map out who are the allies, whether it's a faith-based community, whether it's our corporate partners, and we've seen so much of that now that corporations are getting involved in what is happening and taking actually a stand on racial justice with their products. And we had a call for a boycott of Goya, which we had never seen before. So these are the types of things that we have to talk about, and especially as Hispanics, we're not monolithic. I'm Dominican, so my West Indian culture is different than maybe somebody from Spain or Argentina. And being able to find that commonality is critical to our work, because we can't do it alone.
Do you know Reverend Jefferson in Newark, Reverend Metropolitan Baptist Church, Reverend Jefferson?
Yes.
The reason I say is that everyone must have a go-to minister.
Yes.
Tom Lewis in Birmingham right there. Absolutely. Go to him, Daniel, so to speak. He can mobilize 20 ministers real fast, and disc jockeys come to rescue.
Yeah.
You guys need to be rescued. You're fighting, I think, foes that we don't know you're fighting, and you might not know you're fighting. The organized attempt to discredit you is real. This ain't by chance. This is real-time stuff. We must prepare an organized defense against their offense against their defense. So yeah. Please, if you know Reverend Jefferson in New Jersey, and Reverend Tommy Lewis in Birmingham, and Reverend Year in Baltimore, if we know who you are, Reverend Bobo in St. Louis, we can organize support for you.
Reverend Jackson, in the city of Patterson, Reverend Clayton is my go-to partner. He's a natural partner. He's the president of the NAACP, and whenever something happens, especially when there's community unrest or people don't have information, or they feel like they're being stonewalled somewhere, that is a natural partner. And that's what I'm talking about, the allies that you have to build so that when you are dealing with something that's controversial or the community is hurting the way that it hurts, especially if there's a police involved shooting, you have members of the faith-based community and members and community stakeholders that are there picking up the mantle and explaining to the public what is happening. It's extraordinarily helpful to do that.
And Camila, the only thing I would add is that you're absolutely right with regard to the organizations and that support, because I can tell you that, like, when I decided to prosecute those police officers, we didn't have a number of progressive organizations that were in existence. And you feel like you're on an island by yourself, right? And the entire world is against you. And so subsequently, like, what is encouraging is that you see all of these people of color, and not just women of color, but people of color being subsequently elected, right? And some even inspired by the fact that you were in these positions. But I do have to credit some of the organizations that have been supportive of me, right? Like Pastor Todd Geary, like I call him, that's my OG pastor. We talk on the phone, and every now and then I say, God forgive me, I gotta swear, I just gotta vent, you know, Pastor. But this is where I am. You know, you have fair and just prosecution, you know, the leadership of that organization that was there for me in a way that no other organization has ever been there for me, to be supportive when I was being sued by the police officers that I was rightfully prosecuting, right? You look at the Vera Institute of Justice, who brings, you know, women of color together because we understand and recognize that we face a level of vitriol that other of our colleagues don't necessarily have to. We have an experience, a life experience that other people in these positions don't necessarily have. And so those organizations are critical, and you are absolutely right. We have to build those alliances. But Rainbow Push Coalition, you are absolutely right. We stand on your shoulders, Reverend Jesse Jackson, but we have so much more work to do. And it's at the ground level, and I appreciate you, CK, for organizing this event, hosting this event, but this is where it starts, the ground level, where we are the ones doing the work. There's a reason why for so long, you know, the conservatives have been toting states' rights, right? We are now toting states' rights because if we have a federal system that has garnered and has been created to go against us. And so we need your support on the ground level, and it can't happen without these organizations. So thank you, Camila, for bringing that point up.
Marilyn, Shannon Davis called S. Davis at Rainbow.
It's S. Davis at Rainbow Push. And I've been with Halima.
Okay.
We need to meet again. I'm telling you, we need to meet once a month. You must determine who else should be on the phone. It may be a bunch of us on the phone, because you are the essential workers. You stand between us and unnecessary jailing. You stand between us and prosecution or persecution. You're the frontline workers in this justice struggle. You work against the judge, and police are playing blue. Police are undercutting you. You can't do your job. We don't know that really, unless we meet once a month, find out what's going on in St. Louis, Newark, as the case may be.
Reverend Jackson, this is, you're absolutely right, and we will plan the next stage, the next conversation. And Shelley, you've given us our charge to do that. I just wanted to wrap up the program. I'm going to give each of you a minute, if you can, to have some closing thoughts. And we're going to start with Amelia Valdez, and I want you to know there's so many comments in from the viewers, but one comment was Prosecutor V, ABWL has your back. So against that, if you would make some closing remarks.
Thank you. Thank you kindly. ABWL is the Association of Black Women Lawyers in New Jersey. And this is what I mean. So wherever I go and whatever I do, there is a tribe. And whether it's sorors, whether it's members of the Divine Nine, whether it's people from HBCUs, and I didn't even go to HBCU, but I'm claiming them. Whether it's Hispanic Bar Association, Hispanic National Bar, whatever it is, I have been sitting in this seat for 11 years. And I am on the tail end of my second term. And this work is hard. and it's isolating and it's alienating. And I do that as a single woman with 2 autistic teenagers that are divas, but are disabled. Make no mistake about that. And what I want to say to my panelists, I say thank you for the inspiration. Thank you for the strength and the endurance to keep going, because this work is hard, but it is necessary. And we are at a pivotal time where everyone is watching, but let's not lose the momentum that we now have. Legislation and watching what happens with local legislation, local efforts, that's where it's at. As many community forums and programs as my office sponsors, to be able to explain to the public what we're doing. The public largely does not understand what is happening in terms of how legislation is affected, how policies are implemented, what is being spent in terms of money, government money. Funding reflects priorities. And if you are not funding things that are really moving the needle in terms of reform, then it's just talk. Then we have just spent a Saturday morning just talking with one another. We know these issues because we work on them. So let's make sure that we continue to build those allies, those relationships, so that when they come for us, and they do daily, we're prepared and we're ready to keep going. To my president, Erica Booker, thank you for making space. You made me aware of this program, and here I am. And that's what we have to continue to do for one another to keep going. And in the midst of all that, self-care, 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 prayer, and being rooted and taking care of ourselves is critical, because this stuff is heartbreaking, and it's heartbreaking every day. But I'm encouraged that I know you, that I work with you, and that I'm in the struggle with you. God bless you all. Stay safe. Thank you.
Another comment, and thank you for that. Another comment from one of our viewers. Kudos to our great state attorney of Cook County. We applaud you. Kim Fox, closing thoughts.
I'll keep it brief. I think Camilla said it best. What I would want people to go away with is to pay attention to these races. The amount of vitriol and energy that you see attached to these races should tell you how significant and important that they are. I was an assistant state's attorney for 12 years, and nobody ever really paid attention to this office with the same level of degree that they care right now. And that's because we are doing things differently than they have been done before. We are talking about these systemic issues that have existed and talking about them unapologetically and putting our communities at the forefront. And so for people who are watching, you know, I love doing panels with Marilyn and Kim and now with Camille and Danny, that people could see a through line, right? Because I think when you're in your own jurisdiction, you just see yourself. And then it's always like, what's going on with Kim Fox? Why is someone always coming for Kim Fox? Because it would feel very isolating. But when you hear that Marilyn and Kim and Danny and Camilla all are going through the same issues, then when you hear that there's a special prosecutor in St. Louis and Chicago and someone looking at Maryland, you can start piecing together that it is bigger than just one entity. And then start critically asking questions. Challenge what is being told to you. I think one of my biggest frustrations in all this is they're right. A lot of people don't understand what we do. Ask the question. And then when people tell you a narrative about who we are and what we do, push back. Because that's what's required right now. We're in a time in our history but I'm excited to be in this leadership position because I do believe that we are on the cusp of having fundamental change in our systems, but that requires all of us pushing together. Like we stand at the front of these offices, but we are pushed by the people in our community who are demanding better and more. And on the last piece with the self-care, you know, Marilyn talks about our group thread that we have. There's something heartbreaking, and most of us are mothers of daughters, to be clear. And God bless you with your 2 teens. I got 4 teenage girls here. That's why I keep looking over my shoulder. But all of us have mothers, are mothers of daughters. And when I tell you the hate and vitriol that we get, if you read some of the letters, I mean, at one point we would just share our letters with each other. And then you develop this callus where you're like, wow, they used every slur in like 5 sentences. Like it is real. And that hate that is generated, again, is fueled by something. And that something is the toppling of an existing structure that has benefited some for so long. And for us, it is being able to find a venue or vehicle to talk to each other, to say we're not alone, to give encouragement, to support. And we have our own new sorority that we've developed in doing this work, because it's absolutely necessary. We're the faces of this, but it comes at the expense of also being wives and mothers and daughters and friends. We are like whole dimensional people. This is my title. This is a job that I have. But when people threaten my life, my children get scared. When people say the things that they say on social media, my husband wants to go fight. When all of this, like, we are whole people. And so I would say, keep that in mind too, that these are institutions that we are trying to fundamentally change, but it requires the whole community coming together and supporting us, not just in bad times, but all times. So thank you again for doing this.
Well, thank you. A question or a comment from the audience: due to COVID-19, and this was directed at Marilyn Mosby, wanting to support you, can I attend physically? They want to know if they can go physically to support you due to COVID-19. So would you care to address that in some closing comments?
So yes, you can always, I would encourage you not to come physically, because I've been encouraging everybody in my office, understanding the importance of public safety and well-being of my employees, to not come into work, but to come in as needed. If there's a way for you to virtually appear, as I've already stated, there are hearings this week that are going to directly impact the power and the discretion and the will of the people who have elected me. Please pay attention. You know, these senators, these state legislators that think they're doing good work and are proposing these outrageous sort of recommendations, some of them are very intentional. So we need you to pay attention. And then the only other thing that I would say is that, you know, which has already been eloquently stated by my colleagues, my sisters and my brothers in this struggle, is that it's so much greater than us. This is not about us individually. Please understand and recognize that. That is the one thing for the progressive movement, for the progressive organizations, that I had to understand, and to be quite candidly, by myself. I had to realize this as I was getting hate mail and death threats and mocked and ridiculed and thrown into the international spotlight, where people were calling me, you racist nigger B, right? Like sending this to my office and threatening my folks. Like, it's not about us individually. It is about what we represent. And for far too long, we've danced around the fact that we don't want to call it what it is, but it is racism in this country. It is racism in the criminal justice system. And it's this idea that we want to ensure that at all costs, even the cost of one's life, that we secure white supremacy. That is what we have got to dismantle. And what I can tell you is that prosecutors, these local prosecutors, making decisions about who's going to be charged, what they're going to be charged with, what sentence recommendations we're going to make, if that person gets into the criminal justice system in the first place, is the biggest sort of threat to dismantling white supremacy in the criminal justice system in this country. Please pay attention.
Thank you. Danny Carr, comment is go Alabama, go. So some closing remarks for you.
Well, let me echo all the sentiments again that's been made. And Pastor Jackson, I'll tell you that Pastor Tommy Lewis has been my rock, along with my own pastor, Dr. W.M. Norwood. But Pastor Tommy Lewis and the pastors at the Rainbow Coalition of Alabama have stood with me during tough times, most of which hadn't been in the national spotlight. But I can tell you here in Alabama that the discretion that I have as a prosecutor is challenged each and every day. Each and every day. And I often tell people that, you know, I consider the rights of others before my own feelings, and the feelings of others before my own rights. And I understand that to be here and to use this discretion for the betterment of others is why I'm here. And I'm a proud girl dad. And again, I am so happy that she's here to see Kim Foxx and Marilyn Mosby and Amelia Valdez and Kim Garner. I'm so proud of the fact that she's here to hear you and see you and understand the fight and the struggle. But I also know that she see and hear some of the stuff said about me here locally. And I can tell you that there is no support here other than the pastors of the Rainbow Coalition and some of my fraternity brothers. Of course, I'm a proud member of Kappa Alpha Psi fraternity, but also the Magic City Bar and the National Black Association. I knew Reverend would get a response from you, but again, I'm just proud that I'm here in this position right now and a part of this movement. And I feel like this call today, I have a bunch of other sisters now. And if I can ever do anything for you, if I need to fly somewhere and stand with you, please don't hesitate to call me. I will get on a plane. I will stand with you. I will stand in front of a hot mic, in front of a bunch of pissed off law enforcement officers or unions or whatever. You just call me and I promise you, I will stand there with you. And again, I'm just a blue dot in this red state, but I'm gonna keep fighting the good fight and I'm gonna keep pounding that pavement here in Alabama. That I can promise you.
Yeah.
God bless you.
Thank you so much. And then President to President Erica Gilliam Booker, who has twins, 3-month-old twins, if I'm not mistaken, who's here today. Please let us know in terms of your organization that supports all of these magnificent panelists. What can we do at Rainbow Push Coalition and at the National Bar Association to support these efforts? What can we do? In your
first off,
make whatever closing comments, but if you could answer that too, that'd be wonderful.
And first off, I just want to make clear that National Black Prosecutors Association supports our own, we support Black prosecutors, Kim Garner, Kim Foxx, Marilyn Mosby, Danny Carr, Kamala Valdez. We support you and any other Black prosecutors because it is very important that we support each other. Now, in setting forth our mission through service, support, and enrichment through our conferences to give us the tools to be on the ground and in the trenches, service as we engage the communities that we serve, because we want to be clear that we aren't just this mystical unicorn that's in the sky. We are actually on the ground, engaging our communities, whether it's going to talk to schools through our Real Talk program or junior DA programs to show that as prosecutors, we are human, and also to lend support because we are the gatekeepers of justice. We are the gatekeepers of the accused and the accuser. And that's exactly what we do. And that's so important because when we prosecute, we're keeping an eye towards criminal justice reform. That's very important. So I guess I just want to be clear that in order for you to join, this is where it starts with the National Black Prosecutors Association, because you're starting from the ground. You're starting from the ground up, and we need to be able to continue to recruit and retain and continue that line, because at the end of the day, we need to change that 1%. We not only need to change that 1%, we need to increase it. And that's exactly what we're here to do. We're here to increase that elite, might I say, that elite 1%.
Our chaplain at the National Bar Association is Sonia Natasha Brown here in Atlanta, who's a prosecutor. I don't know if you all know her, but you all had a meeting here in Atlanta that was magnificent last year that I attended. And so last but not least, Kimberly Garner out of St. Louis, you all lost a Titan, Wayman Smith, Reverend Jackson, one of your friends recently, who was for years at Anheuser-Busch. You recently lost one of your Titans in St. Louis. But Kimberly Garner, what are your closing thoughts?
I just want to say I'm humbled and honored to be here with everyone, Reverend Jesse Jackson, my sisters in the struggle, Mr. Danny Carr, Ms. Valdez, Erica. But what we need to really pay attention while we're in this moment in time, we have to pay attention to, not just we as African-American female reform-minded prosecutors, but we actually have to understand that we can't do this alone. You know, everybody says it's not about us, and I support what Marilyn Mosey is saying. It's not about us. But what it's about is the human dignity and respect that we as prosecutors bring to our discretion, that many people challenge that look like us, that actually don't look like us, and sit on the sidelines and critique us and tell us that we're somehow the strange being because we choose to apply the law equally and just and fairly for everyone. This is not just our laws apply to Black people. Our laws apply to everyone. And I hope that the legal community that we know is very conservative, whether you're Black or white, within it. And everybody wants to figure out a way to get somewhere, to become something. But to me, we have to be true thought leaders and actually leaders in doing what's right. And one of the things, this was hard for me to do because I see my sisters like Marilyn Mosby and my sister Kim Fox, who go through so much that they're not even telling you. They tell you in little ways that I have feces mailed to my office this last week because it's a normal day for us. And people say it's not about us. But what I don't like is when I have people, and I'm not talking to these people on the panel, say that, how can we help? How can you help is do the right thing. And if you think racism is okay, then I shouldn't have to tell you where we're going. You should know where we're going when we're the first. Because we have Reverend Jesse Jackson, who paved the way for us, and many of the people like him who made it possible for us to sit in these roles. But if we do not have people fighting the same way they fought back in the day to allow us to be here, we have another fight that's hidden. You can't see the enemy. The enemy looks just like you. The enemy talks like you. They stand next to you and they smile in your face, all the while they're undermining you. And one of the things that's most disgusting that I think right now in this period of time, we have powerful people who choose to attack African-American female reform-minded prosecutors. And actually we have people come to our house and tell us we should be dead, dragged in the streets. Our bodies should be hung with nooses with the KKK. This is normal in Missouri, and we know Alabama, but Missouri, Chicago, Baltimore, we also have people hiding by this COVID-19 pandemic, that more people are suffering, more people are unemployed, more people are talking about violent crime, and they're using this COVID-19 pandemic, that all the health disparities, all the broken systems that we already know exist are highlighted even more now, and they're blaming us. So I hope these like-minded legal entities here, reverends and pastors and people who want to get into this comfortable conversation, we need boots on the ground people fighting day to day with us, because I'm in those rooms where I'm the only female. I'm in those rooms where I'm the only woman. I'm in those rooms where I have people of color who are on my police department, and they look and they sound the same way as these police unions that no one wants to call out. Yeah. And everybody's scared. We have prosecutors who are held hostage by the local investigative agency because they tell you, like they told me, I'm going to make you lose your livelihood. I'm going to make sure you are going to lose your bar license. They told me if I do my job, they're going to make sure they make my life a living hell. So I hope, I'm sorry, Reverend, I know we got pastors on here. Sorry for saying hell. But I just want to say, I need people who aren't afraid, because everybody got a law license. They not trying to do this work. Because everybody talk about we want to be with the Black prosecutors. No, they don't. Because they get in these courtrooms and these judges talk to them sideways and they run. And they go into somewhere where they can do less work and get more money. If you really want to do this struggle, then you will come to our offices and work. You will do the hard work, and you're not going to sit there and be scared to speak truth to power, because a lot of people are afraid. A lot of people are afraid. They're not doing this work. They don't want to do this work because guess what? It's easier to sit there and to have somebody pat you on the back and say, do a good job so you can become a judge, or eventually you might become a prosecutor because you just sit there in silence and you become part of the status quo. But I'm not doing it. I'm going to fight. And if you hear about me going to jail, hopefully one of y'all bail me out on this call, because I don't care. I'm not backing down. I'm telling the truth, because my law license is for justice, it's for human rights and dignity, and I'm not backing down, no way, no how. Thank you.
Go St. Louis, go St. Louis, go St. Louis, go St. Louis.
Absolutely. Well, Reverend Jackson, the last word is yours. But before we get to your last word, please, everyone, 46 days. A lot of the stuff that we're talking about, you know, the tone of the country is set at the top. So for, you know, we are all these nonpartisan, we can't talk partisan politics right at this minute. But 46 days, and what we have to do is protect the right to vote. We talked about the Kappas a minute ago. The Kappas have said that the AKs came in at 800 lawyers, election protection. They're going to outdo them in terms of their numbers. We need election protection lawyers. And at the NBA, we're going to put in, we have over 6,000 that we're infiltrating in the system to protect the right to vote. Reverend Jackson, Dr. King, and others marched, protested, and were killed, some of them, so that we would have the right to vote. So please be mindful of the election. You all know better than any, especially those of you who have to run for political office, that it is so important for us to vote down ballot and to educate our communities. We are voting for democracy. We're voting for our lives. We're voting for the soul of this country. We're voting for social justice. So Reverend Jackson, the last word is to you. And I didn't know if Todd, you're going to close out the program with a prayer, but Reverend Jackson?
First of all, we do a Sunday morning program, 7 to 9 Central Time. I want you guys to be our guest tomorrow morning. On if you're interested in being part of the market, we are 50 markets, 25 countries. If you're interested in being a part of the Sunday morning People Live Radio show, raise your hand. We'll call you back momentarily. Sunday morning, we'll call you. I want you to be part of that radio show. Secondly, you are hit because you stand between police and judges. Many state attorneys have been to the mayors what Barr has been to Trump. The hit guy. And you play a different kind of role. You're not the pastor. You're sitting on the wall. You're not the conduit. Where the police charge somebody and you agree with police and they judge sentence them. You're in a very different position. You're standing where the others have fallen. After all, the Kwame McDonald situation, state's attorney knew that the boy had been killed. 400 days delay. The boy shot 16 times. And the mayor gave him $5 million of hush money, and people went past the hush money. So 400 days, 16 shots, and a cover up. You're breaking the cycle of the cover up. That's why you've been hit by judges and police, really, and others. So please know that we're aware of the nature of your struggle, and we need to know about, be able to know who your local, for example, if we get ministers and ACLU allies where you are, we can instantly call and discharge. We can mobilize people support you when the crisis comes. Like Marilyn is saying, we wouldn't know Marilyn had the Wednesday, Thursday issue if you had not told us. Marilyn, we won't know if you tell us. If you tell us, then we move. The last point is that please go to rainbowpush.org today. Run Rainbow Push. I need you to be card carrying members of Rainbow Push. You need to join the organization and make something happen. CK, I want to say my thanks to you and to Todd and to Shetta Davis for pulling us together. We got to meet at least once a month. We've not had a conversation quite this lively. You're catching hell every day. And that's the role you're playing. But we can cross the easy to bear when they're shared. We want to share your cross and make it easy to bear. Remember, if you will, rainbowpush.org, get this book. And we will get some other material to you, just as the book on legal lynching. We're doing more writing these days. I need to know where you are because we want to get to you every Tuesday. We do a weekly column on something. So thank you, CK. Thank you, my special guest. If you're interested in being a part of our tomorrow morning's meeting, please call Shelley immediately when it's over. I want you to be a special guest tomorrow morning on the People Live radio program. Thank you, CK. Thank you, Todd.
Okay, and I think Todd's going to close out in prayer. And Reverend Santita wanted me to nail down these panelists because she wanted to continue the discussion and because what you all said, the education, getting the word out there, letting people know you need the help. Tomorrow's program has extraordinarily widespread listenership and viewership because it's on Facebook as well. So Santita, who's producing it and co-hosted with Reverend Jackson, wanted me to confirm that you all, I know you all could call, but she wanted me to say confirm right now while y'all are talking. So they will call you and confirm a time, and they will reach out to you all tomorrow.
Marilyn, you with the deal tomorrow morning? Marilyn, 8 o'clock tomorrow, you with the deal?
She's on mute.
I'm you.
Kamala, you with the deal in New Jersey? Kim in Chicago, you with the deal?
I'm with the deal, Reverend.
So what you ladies can do, and gentlemen, what you can do is you can just shoot me an email. I think I put my mobile number in each of the emails that we were corresponding with. And you could shoot me an email or either call me and let me know, and I'll forward your information to Santita to ensure that you guys get all the details for the call tomorrow morning.
Wonderful. And Shelley, we have to thank you for the extraordinary work that you did in pulling this together. I've known you for 2 decades. I'm only 30, of course, but extraordinary work, and thank you for all that you do and for the amount of dedication that you have to Reverend Jackson over the years. And we really, truly appreciate you.
An act of love. It's an act of giving back to the community and being involved and staying connected. And so this is a good tool. So we thank Reverend Jackson for convening us and ensuring that we're all on the same page. So thank you, CK, for hosting as well.
Absolutely. Reverend, you're going to give us a short prayer. We have to end in prayer.
We will end in prayer. Please keep in prayer after the announcement of the settlement in the wrongful death suit of Breonna Taylor. One of the things we haven't talked about in the role of discretion is how the process plays out when it comes to police-involved injuries and death. The attention is now on Daniel Cameron, the Attorney General of the state of Kentucky. There's a whole other conversation about how that case ended up in his hands, to Marilyn, your point, about how those who have claimed entitlement in the system gain the system to the advantages of some and the disadvantages of others. And so I think we ought to be mindful of that. I think there's some anticipation that we might hear what might come out of this grand jury orchestration. We'll put that in air quotes as well, and kind of monitor what's going on in the Jefferson County of Kentucky. There are a few Jefferson counties below the Mason-Dixon line. That's a historical conversation for another day and time about attitudes and mindsets. To Reverend Jackson, thank you for your leadership, your work, and your entrusting us to be able to take some risks and make some mistakes and try to make the conditions better for all of our people. And to you, Madam Chair, thank you for your service, your leadership across the board, not just as Chair of the Board of Rainbow Push Coalition, but in your leadership as President of the National Bar. To my sisters on the call, let me just say to you, Mom and them are proud of y'all in ways that cannot be fully expressed. And so as a brother from another mother, and you all being sisters from other misters, we applaud you, and we certainly stand in solidarity with you, but we will fight for you as well. To Danny Carr, my brother, it was actually Shelley that came Shelley came to Alabama, but I'm coming. So we'll be able to do some hanging out real soon.
Your credit to your race.
Thank you.
There's some stuff behind that. There you go. He's gonna raise those hooks again in a minute. So y'all pray for him. Y'all pray for him. There was something that was said earlier. Justice on the ballot is on the ballot, and freedom hangs in the balance. The gaming has started. We heard from Mitch McConnell last night that the statement from 4 years ago does not have any relevance 4 years later. And so there's going to be an intentional effort to try to stack the ideology of the United States Supreme Court, which is extremely important to the protection of civil rights. And I also heard, I think it was Kim just a minute ago, that we have to remember that human dignity is a human right, and we have to protect it at all costs. And so we will stand with you, Marilyn. I've signed up for 3 days of hearings. There are 15 legislative proposals that are going to be discussed in the Judicial Proceedings Committee of the Maryland State Senate this week that have to do with criminal justice and law enforcement reform. So we've got to stay open, keep us informed. We'll stand with you, and we'll be present, if not physically, on the record to make the case for the cause that affects our people. With that, thank you all. I pray that you will have it. Let me just say this about Erica. Girl, you look, twins, 3 months old, you here. Look, we come into your convention in Chicago in 2021 just because we need to bring balloons, and we can't celebrate you the way we really want to, but we are proud of you, show enough. And we pray that those babies continue to grow happy and healthy, especially in this time. With that, won't we bow together in this moment of solidarity and prayer? God, we cannot thank you enough for what our eyes have seen, our ears have heard, our hearts have felt, and how we're now encouraged and inspired to link arms and do this work. We thank you for the expressions of commitment and concern, but none of this matters if you don't go with us. So we pray, oh God, that you will order our steps, that you will provide light for our path in dark moments, that you will speak to our hearts when the silence is deafening and the words of our enemies seem to drown out everything else. And for these, our brother and our sisters who do this fight and this work on behalf of your people, be the hedge of protection around them and the glory in their midst. Let us collectively do thy will and thy work together in the days to come. Bless us as we go forward. In your name, we do pray and give thanks. Amen.